Hey guys, welcome back to P&W Guitar, and today we are talking about what is the pop-punk guitar sound. So sit back and relax because we're about to deep dive into a genre that's all about catchy hooks and youthful rebellion. Let's do it. So first off, what is pop-punk music? It's exactly what it sounds like. It's youthful, rebellious music. It's anti-government. It's DIY. It's all about the code of ethics that punk rock music is about, mixed with the pop sensibilities of pop radio, catchy hooks, shorter songs, things that make you want to sing and dance. Match those together and you've got a perfect combination of what punk pop truly is. So where did punk pop really come from? In the early 90s, bands like The Offspring and Green Day brought their real punk roots along with that pop sensibility, crafting songs that were catchy, anthemic, and had that Southern California edge that we all love so much. First off, The Offspring, a band that I discovered when I was in the 7th grade. I think the first song I ever heard was Pretty Fly for a White Guy, probably like a lot of people. That song is completely amazing, and it fully opens the door to jump back into the catalog of The Offspring, one of the most important punk pop bands to ever exist, in my opinion, and one that people don't often talk about because they are seen as being, I don't know, a little silly. But if you listen to a record like Smash, you know for sure these guys are legit. They popped up in the early 1990s. They had upbeat tempoed songs, powerful power chords, and interesting single note lines. And all their songs were focused on exactly what this genre is all about. It's all about angry teenagers in their bedrooms being pissed off at their parents, the government, their school, and just their lives in general, and wanting to express that. Let's talk about some other important bands that we're going to have some examples of playing from today. Second are going to be Green Day. Their first few albums were massive, but Dookie smashed it out of the park. These guys took it to a whole nother level, and they became the biggest pop-punk band of the 90s, topping it off by playing Woodstock 99, where they had a massive mud fight that people still talk about to this day. Another massive band in this genre, Blink-182. Some people call them mole punk, which I guess is fair because they were really popular and being played a lot. My first real experience with Blink-182 was probably around the same time, I would say early 2000s, late 90s, where I heard songs like Adam's song, Stay Together for the Kids, Aliens Exist, and honestly just some of their really silly songs from the Mark, Tom, and Travis show, which is an album I still like to listen to. The last band I'm going to talk about is a band that's a really big deal to me. Number one, because I'm Canadian. And number two, because they blended the pop-punk thing along with like early heavy metal influences and just really created their own sound. And to me, this band is really important because they were one of the first pop-punk bands that I heard. A babysitter of mine when I was really young, probably 6 or 7 years old, showed them to me. This band is Sum 41. I know, the Numbers bands back in the 90s, man. They were huge, but these guys were awesome. The first song I ever heard by them was In Too Deep. Had an amazing music video, and I think it was kind of the perfect example of what pop-punk is. You've got cute little catchy single note lines, little melodies that are going to stick into your head. You've got a music video in a pool. You've got just a general band playing in like a skate bowl. You've got these guys doing backflips off of diving boards. the whole song and the music video, the presentation was awesome. It made it just seem like these were guys that you wanted to hang out with and have an awesome time with. And I think that's really the fundamental thing about pop punk is these are young people making fun music, talking about their everyday lives, and really just expressing themselves in a way that other people wanted to get in on, and that is why pop punk became such a massive genre. So now let's talk about not only what makes the pop punk sound what it sounds like, but also some of the techniques that you're going to need to know in order to play this genre to its fullest and most authentic. Alright guys, so now that we've talked about the background of punk, pop, and what makes it what it is, let's really dive into what the important part of this video is, which is, what is the sound? So the sound, on a fundamental level of what punk pop really is, comes down to a guitar that either has P90s or humbuckers and a Marshall amplifier. You want to drive that amp hard. So I've set up a preset here that's going to be available in the description below if you're a Helix user. This is basically a Marshall amp. We've got a couple of distortion pedals and overdrive pedals to help boost it for certain settings. And we've also got quite a bit of modulation. So the punk pop sound, fundamentally, is going to be something along the lines of this. This is our cleanest sound that we've got set up right now. So as you can hear, it's not exactly dead clean. But the thing about this is, it's the kind of sound that you can roll back on your volume a little bit and get exactly the kind of clean sound that we're looking for. So let's try that. See what I mean? So it's got a bit of edge on it. You roll it back, you still get the clean sound, but you've also got the breakup that you're looking for. Another big thing with a punk pop sound is going to be palm muting. If you know how to palm mute, it's really just resting your hand on the strings and chugging along. This is going to be the same for metal, but obviously we're not going to get the amount of chunk out of this sound as we would in a metal context. Way less compressed, way more open. You know, that's just the way that the punk pop sound is. I think that the sound is really heavily derived from early punk, which was basically just loud, abrasive rock music. Now the next big thing is going to be power chords. So you take your two fingers here, your first finger and your ring finger. So you play 3 and 5. You can add your pinky in on the string below that. Add your palm mutes to that. So that's going to be the basis for our playing. Now, let's talk about some of the other effects that you can use in punk pop to really get the kind of sound that a lot of these bands were getting. Modulation was a big deal, so you're going to have a little bit of reverb and delay on these sounds, as you can hear. Just a little bit of reverb. A light amount, nothing crazy. Now, in this preset that I've made, I've also got a tremolo set up. This is something that quite a few bands use, but probably most known by Green Day. So that's just an example. Obviously, these presets you can change if you'd like to. I've got this set up so channel 1, or your first setup, is going to be kind of a light clean like we just played. Second one is going to be more heavily distorted. Third, and even more heavily distorted with 2 distortion pedals. And then the last one is going to be the 2 distortion pedals with a delay for more of a lead sound. But you can use this sound on any of those. Just warbles the sound, makes it sound really cool. It's very enjoyable. Now we're going to jump to a bit more of a distorted sound here. And that is exactly what I want to do here. So for this sound, this is the kind of thing where another technique comes in really handy with pop punk, and it's going to be the power slide or pick slide. So you're going to scrape your pick against your strings, get that kind of sound. This was used so much for intros of songs, so much for transitional pieces. It's just a lot of fun, and it so buys into the punk attitude that we're going for with this kind of ones. Now I'm going to put on a flanger. You can do a flanger or a phaser. I think what I've got here is a flanger. Yeah, so we've got a flanger here, and what's really cool about this sound, if you're doing your palm muted chugging, it moves the sound around, so you get like a much more dynamic, interesting sound. I really think that another big aspect of the punk pop playing is literally just laying your fingers across the strings and just strumming the strings. You go. Now that brings me to third. I'm going to jump up to another level of distortion here, is where we bring in the octave chords. This is another massive part of the pop punk sound, very similar to your power chord, but you just take out the string in between and mute it. That is another massive part of this sound. You're going to use these kinds of things as ways of following along, usually with a vocal melody. So that is another big part of what guitar players were doing in the early 90s, late 90s, up to the mid 2000s. Still something that they were doing. Now another thing with a sound like this were single note lined riffs. So usually fairly simple. I could use this as an example. Single note line riffs are going to be a massive part of the sound as well, something that a lot of people do. Usually they are like intro riffs or something to keep the song interesting. Another melody that people can latch onto, like I said, this genre is all about riffs, all about melodies. So add as many as you can, as many hooks as you can get into the song, the better. Now the last aspect of the punk pop sound is going to be lead playing. Now, a big aspect of the lead playing when it comes to punk pop is that it's not overly complicated, generally speaking, and it is heavily blues-based. So people like Chuck Berry, I know were a big influence on people like Billy Joe Armstrong. So when you're playing... that is very much a blues rock staple. So if you know your pentatonic scales, you're probably in good neighborhood to be able to play punk pop lead parts. And if you're unsure of what else to do, you can add in some of those octaves, you can add in the power slide. You can just play a string very fast. And pick some notes in there that work in the scale or the key that you're playing in, and immediately you're going to have a really awesome sound. And if all else fails, follow the vocal melody. There's your lead part. Perfect, right? Now there's one last sound that I want to talk about with the punk pop sound, and that would be this, which comes down to a chorus sound. So we've got... So chorus wasn't used overly in a lot of punk pop songs, but it is still definitely present, and I thought worth including in this preset. Adds another dimension to the sound. It's supposed to mimic the sound of a 12-string. I never find it really brings that 12-string sound out, but it does add almost like kind of a harmony effect to your guitar, very lightly. And that's how I've got it set up on this one. You can also add it to a more distorted sound. So I feel like drawing from the 80s, some of these punk pop bands were kind of drawing sounds and influences, not just from the hardcore and the punk songs and bands of that era, but probably picking up some guitar sounds from some of the hair metal bands and heavy metal bands as well. So there you have it. If you want to play punk pop, get yourself a guitar with a pair of humbuckers. 1P90 in the bridge and a volume is also another really popular thing, like a Les Paul Jr. And plug into a Marshall, get yourself a couple of pedals. You're good to go. And if you've got a digital guitar rig like I do, like I said, feel free to download my Helix patch. I'm going to include that here from Helix Central, so you guys can use that. Feel free to adjust it as you like to make it more interesting. I use the JCM 800, which is kind of your standard Marshall that people would use for this kind of music. But bands like Rancid and NoFX, they use like JCM 900 sometimes. You might see Friedman's because they're a more modern version of a Marshall. People really like those. Even some more heavy metal sounding amps. I've seen people play Mesas. Honestly, anything with a decent distortion channel, you guys can use it. You can play punk pop with it. You can have fun. Pop punk is all about having fun and embracing your teenage self. So to all of my elder millennials, elder emos, pop punk kids, skater dropouts, and burnouts, this is for you.